Hey guys, it's Graham. Welcome back to Truckerman Reads, day 3 of The Voice. Sorry about that. Got a nonfiction for you today by Frank Cunningham. I believe, if I read right, this one originally came out around the 1960s. It was targeted for the the 100-year anniversary of the Civil War. And it's about a lesser-known brigadier general named I'm going to go with Stan Watie. That's just the way that I've been saying it. It might be Stan Watie, I don't know. He fought for the Confederacy, and he was not a full-blooded Cherokee. We'll get to that in a second, but he was mostly Cherokee. And it's about how he and his fellow Cherokees decided to join up with the Confederacy out here in Indian Territory, or at least it was Indian Territory back then. The book is called, very descriptively, General Stan Watie's Confederate Indians. I first picked this up back in 2021, and I got about halfway through it. I thought that I had finished it, but I decided to pick it up and reread it because there wasn't a whole lot that I remembered from it. And as I got past that halfway point, it's like, oh yeah, I didn't finish this one. But about a month after I was reading it in 21, I ended up taking a trip to central Pennsylvania, and I got to go to the National Civil War History Museum. And there was one small corner of an exhibit about Stan Watie. I mean, when it's the Civil War, there's a lot of personalities to focus on, and the bigger ones suck up a lot of oxygen. But because of that very phenomenon, lesser ones who were still important and impactful, often didn't have as much written about them. And so Frank Cunningham took on the task of digging up what he could about this man, Stan Watie, who we waged war on behalf of his people under the flag of the Confederacy during the Civil War. The basic tee-up of it is that after the Cherokee, along with several other Indian nations, got punted out to what is now modern Oklahoma, there were factions within the various tribes, including the Cherokee, the Creek, the Choctaw, the Chickasaw, and the Seminoles. The Creeks are the Muskogee. But I've never looked into why they're called the Creek instead. And within the Cherokee, there were two factions, basically between, this is an oversimplification, who had more Cherokee blood, and those different sides would kind of jockey for power within the larger Cherokee nation, and the leaders effectively were Stan Watie on the one side and John Ross on the other. Now, I think I've seen something contradictory to this later, but as far as Cunningham's book goes, he states that Stan Watie had more Cherokee blood through his ancestry than John Ross did, but I guess John Ross had a larger political coalition within the nation. But there was also an assassination taken out by the Ross loyalists against one of Stan Watie's relatives. And so there was beef, there was bad blood, and there was kind of a constant angling for power. And when the Civil War kicked off, the Cherokees then had an opportunity. They said, look, it's all of the southern states against the Federals. And if the South wins, then, hey, we've got a shot at getting back our ancestral lands in what is now Georgia. On top of that, and I'm reading a different book to expound upon this, there were Indian nations that also practiced chattel slavery. And the Cherokees, or at least certain subsets of them, were among this. One of the more surprising declarations in this book early on is that not only were there some Cherokees who practiced slavery, they had very strong anti-miscegenation laws. It's a big $5 word that you don't hear a whole lot anymore because laws like that have gone by the wayside. But miscegenation is basically interracial, not even so much marriage, it's just people of different races breeding. And the Cherokee had very hard laws against anybody from the nation doing this with blacks. The Free State of Jones, if you remember that movie, it didn't do too well. It had Matthew McConaughey and Marshall Ali. I tried reading the book, and the book focuses a lot more on a descendant of some of those Civil War era characters who was then like declared to have less than legal status in some kind of standing because his ancestors were miscegnatists. This was an issue in terms of the law back in the 1860s, and obviously you could dilute your blood with one race, but they wouldn't stand for it if you did it with another. And again, at least as far as Cunningham asserts, Cherokees who bred with blacks were executed. Like, this is something they took very seriously. It's like, this is pretty intense stuff. And so, at least to some extent, that played a factor in Stand Watie's faction of Cherokees saying, we're going to team up with the Confederacy. We can get our lands back, but otherwise continue our path to self-determination. So, make of that what you will. And then from there, the book goes on to talk about just the logistics and the outcome of various elements of the war. I've read enough Civil War nonfiction to get a feel for how the pulse of every book will go. There will be some setup in like the first 20% that will talk about big picture things, narrative things like that. And then there's this long and muddy middle where it's just, we went here, we fought these guys, we were hungry for this, we ran out of ammo, the weather was bad, we went somewhere else, we fought here. It's a lot of just the name and dates of it all. And you have this inexorable march and grind towards the ending, where then it's like, okay, and then this side lost, this place lost here, these guys surrendered over there. Stand Watie remains significant not just because of his successes, especially in terms of guerrilla warfare out here in Indian territory, going into battle in Arkansas and such, but also because he was not only the highest ranking Native American officer on either side. I mean, the Confederates promoted this Cherokee higher than they promoted several of their traditionally white Southern officers. He was the last major Confederate officer to surrender. There was one more, and I wasn't taking notes on this. I was as I was reading through it, but there was one more officer who fled into Mexico and never surrendered. But as for those who did surrender, Stand Watie ultimately did, but it was about a month or two after Lee surrendered at Appomattox. And he ended up living out his days, Watie did, out here in Oklahoma. I believe that I've seen signage in my travels out here. There are various historical markers in the eastern quadrant of the state, which is largely the Cherokee Nation, dedicated to Stand Watie. So I thought that was interesting to read up on the guy, and Frank Cunningham did a great job of putting together a rather concise book about the man. There's a cover blurb that says, like, he does for Stand Watie what Douglas Southall Freeman did for Robert E. Lee. And it's like, I'm looking over at my shelf, and I was like, I have the 4-volume hardcover set of Freeman's books on Robert E. Lee. This is a somewhat thin, accessible 200-page paperback about Stand Watie. But that might be all the information that could be found about him. The Confederacy, up to and including the President, Jefferson Davis, and other high-ranking officers, were highly complimentary of the prowess and the successes that Stand Watie had, along with the other Indian regiments who had joined along with the Confederacy. Obviously, racial divisions were a motivator in various ways for the conflict, but it wasn't such a hard and fast rule that anybody who wasn't a traditional white Southerner was excluded from participation in the cause. And I'm sure there will be lots of people excusing that one way or another, but it's just one other piece of evidence that demonstrates how complicated this conflict was and why those who participated in it were doing so for a multitude of reasons. So, fascinating book, intriguing figure. I'm glad I was able to pick this one up. Go check out General Stand Watie's Confederate Indians by Frank Cunningham. All right, that'll do it for this one. Thanks for watching. Best way to support the channel is over on Substack. You can become a paid subscriber. I don't do that over here on YouTube. Over there, it's $5 a month, but you get a big discount if you just back it for the whole year. Or you can go check the link in the description to my Amazon page. Buy one of my books. Read it. Tell me what you think in the comments below. Drive safe. See you out there.